Hello everybody, Louis here, and let's talk C Sharp. Today we'll talk about while loops, and if you've seen my video on do while loops, you already know 90% of what we'll cover today. So let's get started. If you have a good memory, you remember that the syntax of a do while loop is something like this. So I'll have a do statement and I'll have a while statement. Okay, so in here I'll have some code, and down here I'm gonna have some condition, and let's say that my condition is something like counter is less than 10, and that's assuming that I do have a counter variable which starts at 0, and then I do some code and I have my counter plus plus at the end, sometimes at the end, sometimes at the beginning. But in short, this is what I have for a do while statement, right? And as we discussed in the other video, do while loops are actually what some people call post processed loops. What that means is that the code you have within the loop will run at least once for do while statements. Okay, and that's because the code execution is line after line, right? So when you reach line 11, it doesn't check for any condition, it just runs the code, and only after this code is run, that's when it checks whether this condition is true. If it is true, it'll repeat this code. If it's not, it'll just move on. Okay, so that's what some people call post-processed loop. While loops, however, are different, okay? And the only difference here in terms of syntax is that the while statement goes at the top. So we're gonna have a while, some condition in there, and you're gonna have some code in here, okay? The condition that goes in here is exactly the same. Okay, so we're gonna have something like counter is less than 10, and of course I cannot forget to increment my counter variable, otherwise I'll get an infinite loop and I don't want that. Okay, well, for this problem I don't want that. Maybe there are situations in which you may fall into an infinite loop on purpose, but that's not what we're trying to do now. Okay, so this loop, the while loop, in contrast to the do while loops, they are actually pre-processed loops, okay? And what that means is that when the code execution reaches line 19, it'll actually check whether this condition is true, and it will only run this code if my condition is true. Otherwise, it'll just skip the whole thing and move on, okay? So, in other words, while loops, when working with while loops, or even for loops for that matter, there is a chance that my code may never be executed, okay? So there's a chance my code will be executed 0 times, all right? And that is determined by this condition right here, whether it returns true or false. Of course, that depends on the value that I have in my counter variable, my control variable at that point in time as well, right? But this behavior is very different from do while loops in the sense that my code will run at least once, okay? So that said, we already know the syntax differences between while and do while, and we already know the behavioral difference between while and do while loops. Okay, so from there we can just move on and let's work on a problem. So let me remove that. Let's say that I have an array of strings, okay, and that array of strings is actually populated with all weekdays, okay? And what I want to do is something very simple. I just want to display these values in the console. Okay, so to do that, this is a very simple problem, but problem complexity is not something that we're worried about. In these videos, I actually want to show you the concept, and from there, you can explore it as you wish. So if I have a while loop and a counter, I can actually rename this variable. Maybe I want to call it index, make it a little more explicit as to what this variable does, right? And what I want to do, something simple, I just want to do a console write line, and I want to display the element in my days array where my index is something. I'm going to display that, and I'll have separate lines for each day. And of course, I cannot forget to increment my index variable. Otherwise, again, I'll have an infinite loop, and that's not what I'm looking for this exercise. So if I just go ahead and run this, here's my output. So what I get is all weekdays from Sunday to Saturday, except there's a bit of a problem, and this is something I wanted to show you here. It is very easy, and this is probably one of the most common mistakes that students make when working with loops and arrays at the same time. Okay, so there are actually pretty high chances that if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't know enough about what you're doing, you will get this kind of error. Okay, so index out of range exception. So why is that? So in C#, this exception means that you are trying to access an element in your array in a position that does not exist. Okay, so for example, what's happening here, and I did this on purpose, if you look at the days array, I actually have all the weekdays, right? All the days in a week, right? That means the size of this array is 7, okay? But my condition here is while index is less than 10. So I get an error when I try to access my position of index 7, or in other words, the 8th element of my array. Okay, so why the index is 7 but it's actually the 8th element? That's because arrays are indexed and the index is 0 based. So that means the index of Sunday is 0, the index of Monday is 1, and then Tuesday, Wednesday till the index of Saturday is 6. Okay, Saturday is the 7th element in the array, but its index is actually 6. Okay, and that's when we get a problem, because we're trying to access the 8th element in the array, or the array where the index is 7, and it does not exist because my array is only of size 7. All right, so what I have to do here instead is, of course, I could do something like index is less than 7. I think this will work, but arrays have a length property which gives me the size of the array I'm working with, so I don't have to worry if it's 7, if it's 8, if it's 6. I just call the length property. Okay, so if I run this code, there we go. I get all my weekdays, or days that I have in a week, one in each line, and I don't get any errors. Perfect. My code is fine. My code is correct. So make sure that you pay attention to these details, because it is very, very easy to make mistakes, and you don't want to make mistakes. All right, that's it for this video, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.